Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida for the Space Shuttle Atlantis STS-132 pre-launch news conference. Joining me today is the chair of the mission management team, Mike Moses.
Good morning.
Shuttle launch director, Mike Leinbach.
Good morning.
And STS-132 weather officer, Todd McNamara.
Good morning.
We'll hear from our panelists and then we'll take questions. Mr. Moses.
Thanks, Kendra. Well, welcome everybody. Here to report the results of our L-2 MMT. That's our mission management team meeting here on launch minus 2 days. It's kind of the kickoff of the official mission management team as we get ready to go into the countdown and launch. We really had nothing to talk about. In fact, I stretched the meeting out to 18 minutes long today. It was a challenge, but we managed to pull that off. Talked a little bit about the weather. Todd will cover that here today. We talked about the systems. Mike gave us a status on the countdown. He'll give you that update as well. Everything's looking great. The vehicle's in great shape out on the pad. We talked to the station team. They just finished the relocation of the Soyuz, the 21S, over from the FGB Nadir port, which is where the MRM module that we're bringing up is going to go, and it's now back at the SM aft position. So the ISS is in good shape. All their criteria that they need to have satisfied before we're ready to launch have been met, and so they're ready for our mission. The crew's been doing good. They're in good shape. They've been flying the STA. They're going to have one more run tomorrow, and they'll be ready to go. And so from a space shuttle program, ISS program standpoint, we're ready to launch Atlantis and get this mission underway. Just to recap, you've heard all the pre-mission briefings. 3 EVAs on this flight. The first one is basically getting some of the ORUs, which are the orbital replacement units, the spares, off of one of the payload racks that we're carrying up. It's called an ICC VLD. It's a deployable carrier. It's going to go over to the station on flight day 3 after we dock. The first EVA, they'll go out and they'll take off a KU band antenna that'll be used as a spare antenna to put that on the station, and a transfer platform, an enhanced transfer platform that goes on the SPDM, which is the Special Purpose Dexterous Manipulator, the Dexter robot arm that was launched back on STS-123, built by Canada to be the station extra robotic hands. And so we're going to give it a new stowage platform that's powered and has a lot more capability than the one that's up there right now. And then we start 2 EVAs. So EVAs 2 and 3 will be battery replacements, R&Rs, remove and replace. Basically, on STS-127, we removed 6 of the batteries from the P6 truss, the port number 6 truss. That was the first one that was launched way back when and used as this initial solar platform for the station. So their batteries are kind of at the end of their life. We changed out 6 of them on STS-127. We'll change out the remaining 6 on this mission and bring those home. And then the MRM, which is the Russian multi-purpose research module, that's going over on flight day 5. That'll be installed on the FGB. And I think about flight day 7, they'll open the hatches and do an ingress. They're not going to do a full ingress. That thing is packed to the gills with cargo inside. And until the shuttle crew leaves, there's not enough room on station to completely unpack that module and start to stow it in the right place. So they'll do a quick ingress environmental check, but they're not going to do a whole lot of work inside that module. The last thing to talk about is the Middeck Science. This mission's carrying up a whole lot of science. In fact, we added a lot. We call it kind of sortie science, that it's going to be done on the station, but it's going to take advantage of the shuttle crew and the extra hands that are going to be around. So we're flying a lot of science missions on the middeck. They're going to go up, be transferred over to the station, be run and executed, and then brought back down and returned on this mission. So a couple of days worth of science operations. In fact, it's one of the reasons why, if we find ourselves in a slip situation, you'll see us talk about there's a sliver of window in June that we would probably not try to launch into, and that's because there would only be a 3-person crew on station, and that would lose the ability to do that science that we're carrying up specifically on this mission for that purpose. So not to talk about the bad news of slipping, because we're going to launch Friday. It's going to be perfect. Everything will be great. But it just wanted to highlight the science that we are taking up and the utilization we're doing on the station. Speaking of station, I did want to give a reminder to the fact that they're receiving a huge honor tomorrow night up in Arlington. They received the 2009 Collier Trophy from the National Aeronautics Association as their yearly winner, being recognized for the accomplishment of building such a huge orbiting spacecraft with international cooperation and promoting that national laboratory in space. So a real honor for them, and we're really proud of them to be getting that award. And then finally, just to highlight, you guys have been asking a lot of questions and everybody's been talking about it. This is Atlantis' final planned mission. It's been a glorious career. Started back in 1985. Actually, construction started in the 80s, and its first flight was in 1985. So this will be the 32nd mission of Atlantis. And we're not taking a lot of time reflecting back here before launch, but I'm sure once she gets back, we'll have a few celebrations. She is going to turn around and be processed for launch on need, so it's not the end of the line. Atlantis is going to go back into the OPF and start down mission processing and turn around. In fact, we have a full flow, pulling RCC panels, looking for corrosion, doing all the things we would do as if we were truly going to launch STS-335, which is the rescue mission for our final shuttle flight, STS-134. And so it'll go into the OPF and be processed again, but probably won't see the pad again. And so it's a bittersweet time. But like I said, the teams are focused on the launch here, and we're not really looking back just yet. We'll probably wait until we get it safely home before we start doing that. So that's all I had. Mike?
Okay, thanks, Mike. Well, the countdown's going exceedingly well. We're not tracking any issues right now at all that would prevent an on-time liftoff Friday morning. As Mike said, Team Atlantis is really hitting the stride right now. We're clicking on all 8 cylinders. No issues at the launch pad. Just quick reminder that we do have the Delta on the range on the 20th, and that says we only have through and including the 18th to get off the pad should we scrub for whatever reason. But expect we'll be able to launch Friday afternoon on time. A couple milestones in the countdown coming up. We start the fuel cell cryogenic loading this afternoon about noontime, and the weather should be good for that. And you'll hear from Todd here momentarily. The rotating service structure retraction is tomorrow evening about 5:30. And then we clear the pad and begin loading the external tank about 5 o'clock Friday morning in preparation for launch at 2:20 Friday afternoon. So again, in summary, everything is going really, really well in Atlantis, and the boosters and the tank and the ground support equipment. The team is in great spirits, and we're ready to give it our best shot Friday. Todd?
Good morning. Overall, the weather looks favorable not only for pre-launch operations today and tomorrow, but also for the launch on Friday. If we could take a look at the satellite imagery, you can see basically not very many clouds over Florida right now, and that's due to a very strong high pressure center. That high pressure center has been strong and dominant over us for at least 3 or 4 days now, and it's been keeping all that nasty weather all the way out around Texas up through the Ohio Valley region well up to our north and west. And that's going to continue for the next several days, at least until Monday. So for the next 24 to 48 hours, I'm looking for scattered skies with that high pressure center at the surface still dominating our weather pattern. We'll see some clouds out over the water kind of moving onshore. And for RSS retract tomorrow afternoon and tanking Friday morning, looking for some of those scattered clouds in the low levels to kind of move onshore. Could be a spotty shower in the early morning hours along the coast. Very, very brief as those low strata Q clouds move in. But overall, very favorable conditions for tanking and RSS retract. For Friday afternoon and launch, still the same type of conditions. High pressure is going to dominate our area. The high pressure center is going to be just to our north, so we're going to see easterly winds peaking up right around 18 knots or so, well below or below any type of launch constraints. And the only concern I do have is that we could see some enhanced convergence in the low levels, which makes those clouds a little bit larger in extent, and that could hamper or give us a problem with the low cloud ceiling rule. If those ceilings kind of move in, they're going to be very quick moving. They're going to move in those strong easterly winds rather rapidly, so it'll be very brief. But overall, we're looking at the probability of KSC weather prohibiting launch of 30% at this time. As far as a 24 and 48 hour slip, if we would need that opportunity, weather's still going to look good. The high pressure is still going to dominate Florida. We're still going to see those easterly winds in the low levels, and we're still going to see some of those clouds move from out over the water onshore. We could see a little increase in the winds up to 20 knots on Sunday, and that could be an added increase in crosswind concerns. So the probability of KSC weather violating launch or prohibiting launch for Saturday and Sunday is also at 30% due to those low cloud ceilings possibly moving in, and on Sunday the crosswinds. As far as the abort landing sites here in the U.S., the Spaceflight Meteorology Group is forecasting great conditions Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for both Edwards and White Sands. And then as far as the overseas locations, they are forecasting ceilings, winds, and showers within 20 to affect Zaragoza and Istris, both Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. However, Marone's looking very good all 3 days, and that'll be our one good TAL site as far as weather's concerned for launch operations. So overall, right now we're sitting with high pressure over the top of us. It's going to dominate us at least until Monday. We're going to see low clouds out over the water moving onshore. We have a slight chance of some low clouds moving in and giving us a ceiling on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And because of that, we have a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. Kendria?
Thank you. We'll now take questions. When the microphone comes your way, please state your name, affiliation, and to whom you're addressing your question. Start in the front with Chris.
Chris Gebhardt with NASASpaceflight.com with, I believe, two for Mike Moses. The CSCS timeline for station support for the 132 crew out through September, how many days, what's the limiting consumable, and how many days do you have on that and to follow up?
See, for the contingency safe haven consumables we have up on station, they right now have food to support 125 days, which is the duration it takes us to get to the launch in September. So we have that covered, no problem. The thing that does not assume is there are 2 Progress resupply launches that occur between now and then, and for conservatism, we don't assume that those are successful, so we don't count those. Obviously, we'd have 2 chances to send up Progresses with tons more supplies, food, whatever we needed. So we'd have way more than that 125 days.
And in terms of the cryo load for Atlantis' fuel cells, you know, with Endeavour and Discovery, you get the added benefit of Spitz up on station to draw power from that, and with Atlantis, you don't. I know this mission is packed to the gills, a 12 + 0 + 2 day flight. If you get off the ground on time with a full consumable load on board, do you know how much wiggle room you expect to have in the cryos over that 12 + 0 + 2 day limit?
Yeah, let's see. So we typically have about 96 hours of pad hold. Mike, I don't remember the exact number this time. Mm-hmm. So that's an amount of time we can sit on the pad before we have to top off the tanks. If we launched on time, that's then available to use as orbit margin, and it converts over to be pretty close to an extra day. So it wouldn't take much. We might actually already be there by the time we lift off to have an extra consumables day if needed. No plans to use it. There's nothing station needs to do it. It's just it would put that +1 back in the bank if for some reason we did want to use it.
Robert?
Robert Perlman with collectspace.com with a question for Mike Moses and Mike Leinbach. I don't know if it's normal for you and your respective team members or colleagues to go out to RSS, but given that it is probably the last time that Atlantis may sit on the pad, do you plan to have spend some time observing the orbiter as it's revealed for flight?
I'll go first. I'll let you take that one.
Okay. We have a couple ways to answer that question. First of all, personally, I've already been out to the pad, so I don't plan to go out again. Plus, we have the high-pressure gas tanks on board the orbiter right now are pressurized, and so what we try to limit are discretionary walk-downs of the pad. Folks that just wanted to go out and see the vehicle one last time, they've already done that, and now it's all launch-related business at the pad. So. I think everybody who's wanted to go out and reflect and take a couple extra pictures has already done so.
Bill.
Hi, Bill Horowitz, CBS. A couple from me. I don't know if this is a weather question or a Mike Moses question. Is the volcanic ash any issue at all if you guys ended up in a TAL? We were talking about abort sites just then. Was just wondering.
Yeah, we've been talking about it. You know, I think currently it's causing some closures over in Europe. The projections, we did talk to our forecasters. Those would be the guys back in Houston with the Spaceflight Meteorology Group. They have the tools they would need to forecast if we did have problems. From an orbiter perspective, it's probably not an impact to us since we come in at such high altitude, and currently the ash is at pretty low altitude. We're looking at what it would do to the weather recon aircraft, the search and rescue forces, that kind of thing. But basically, the predictions are by Friday it's going to not be a big threat to us. But we'll keep an eye on it. We've been talking about it, but don't expect it to be an ops impact to us.
Okay, and since you went out of your way to talk about Atlantis' last flight, you know, if you're a reporter and everybody talks about the last flight, and yet there seems to be this lingering thought that maybe it would actually fly one more time. Has that been ruled out at this point, or is that still a theoretical possibility that, in other words, if I got to keep saying last planned flight, or can I say it's the last flight?
It is the last planned flight. You know, we could go theoretical possibilities that we could be stopping everything after this flight. We could be flying for another 30 years. But right, no, I know what you mean, Bill. So we are planning, and our current direction, our current budget guidance is that STS-335 is the rescue mission, and we're not launching it. The possibility exists to turn that into an actual launch. The hardware's here, it exists. We are currently not doing that. And so, but somebody could tell us to. So I can't answer the question for you because it's not up to me.
Todd.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today. I have a couple for Mike. While you're not in the reflection mode yet, I'm wondering if you can tell me what the mood is among the people who follow that 104 tail number as you're approaching what could be the last flight of Atlantis?
Well, you know, we've contacted some of the earlier flow directors for Atlantis and see if they wanted to come out for the final launch, that type of thing. Flow directors, flow managers, some of the key people along the way over the last 25 years that Atlantis has been here. As Mike mentioned, she started production 30 years ago, so it's been a good long run for Atlantis. But no, you know, it's the type of thing where when you're alone and thinking about it, yeah, it kind of hits you. But when you're on console, like me and my launch team, we have a job to do, and we're going to do that job. I think after launch, there'll probably be a little tear in some people's eyes. I think after landing, there will be. But then there'll be some celebrations, too, and that'll take care of all that for us.
And Mike, could you tell me how far in terms of processing you will be taking Atlantis? I know you have to prepare for that flight as if it's going to be a real flight, but will it still be in the OPF at the time of the last launch? Would it be in the VAB? If you slip till February, would you take it to the pad?
I'm going to try to be as slippery on that answer as Mike was on his answer to Bill. If you could tell me when the last launch is, I could tell you where Atlantis is going to be.
Right.
I'm not sure. We're going to take it well into the processing flow because we have to. And where it actually ends up when Discovery launches and when Endeavour launches, yeah, we'll just have to see. The manifest is really kind of fluid right now, based on a lot of different constraints coming our way. So we're gonna process it. We're gonna hit it hard and heavy when she comes home, and be ready for whatever the program tells us to do. But if we had an answer for you, we'd tell you honestly. But we just don't right now.
Yeah, but about the only thing I could offer is from a budget perspective, we are budgeting that we will ship all the SRB segments here. In fact, the last set are coming at the end of this month. The ET will be here. And that we are going to stack the SRBs. I don't know that we'll make it to ET mate, but we are planning to then have the ops budget to then destack those SRBs. So we're assuming that we're going to get that far. But again, it's like Mike said, it all depends on where the vehicles happen to be in the flow with the launch dates as to what we actually end up doing.
Marcia.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press, along that same theme. Maybe both of the mics. How strong is the hope out there that there's going to be another flight of Atlantis? I mean, is this talked about all the time on off hours, or just how much are the employees really hoping that happens?
Well,
my answer is cynical, so you go first.
I'll talk about the KSC workforce, especially the 104 team. I'm sure I know there's a lot of hope that we get another flight, but there's also a lot of realism that that's not right now the plan, and so while we can hope all we want, we're in the processing mode for the LON only. And if that turns into a real flight, then so be it. The Atlantis team loves that ship and loves what they do, so you bet they want to have another flight. Just don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say too. Is you can't blame anybody that works on it for hoping, but from just looking at all the different options and how things go on the roller coaster just for the last year, if not go back 30 years, you just never know what's going to happen. So having hope is one thing, but holding on to it's a different thing. So yeah, we're not really focused on that.
And how many people have worked on Atlantis for this flow? If you count everybody, do you have any kind of estimate on numbers?
Boy, oh boy. I don't have that number off the top of my head. We can get that for you because it would include a heck of a lot of people. It's not just the processing folks here, obviously.
Yeah.
We'd have to get that for you. I'm
that'd
sorry.
Be good to know. And I think last week Bill Gerstenmaier said that he'd like to know by the end of June what's going to happen regarding Atlantis and maybe an extra flight. Could you go? How much farther past that could you go from all sorts of point of views?
From a program perspective, at some point the planning, we need to start having a crew assigned for training to switch the mission from a rescue mission to an actual execution. So June is kind of where we're drawing our line. It's a fairly soft line. We could do some things to work around it depending on what content you put on that mission. From a station perspective, you'd need a fairly good amount of lead time to decide what hardware you were going to fly so that you make sure you procure it in time and it's here and processed and ready to go. So June is about the time where we kind of say, if we're really going to do it, it's time to go get serious. We could probably go a little longer than that, but it would be nice to know by then. June also kind of lines up with about the same time we're going to try to decide what we're going to be doing with launch dates for the next 2 missions once we get the payload assessments for both the PMM module that's flying on STS-133 and the AMS module flying on STS-134. We'll have had a chance to get that input back from the payload teams and digest it. So June also is about the same time we're going to try to nail down the rest of our manifest. So I think that's why Gerstenmaier was throwing out June. I don't think there's anything magic about that date, but yeah, the sooner we know the better, that's for sure.
Ken?
Hi, thank you. Ken Kramer for Spaceflight Magazine and the Planetary Society. First, congratulations and to all of your team. I have a few questions for you. First, just to follow up again on the potential 135, have you stopped all planning for putting a hardware or what you would actually put onto that potential mission?
See, we never took that much further than what we would do from a baseline assessment. So we had to basically do what we call a flight design requirement document freeze point, where we identify what goes in the payload bay. That then kicks off a whole cycle of cargo drawings to lay out mass properties, center of gravities, and all that stuff. So we identified what that configuration would be, but we haven't done anything to procure, purchase, or load any of that hardware. So from that standpoint, all we did was identify what potentially would fly on that mission. And it was all driven not from a 135 mission, but a 335. You know, if we did do a crew rescue at the end of the station's lifetime, it was deemed to be a good idea to make that an MPLM flight so that we could resupply all the things we just scavenged off the station to keep our crew safe until the next, until the rescue came. So you'd like to be able to resupply it so they don't immediately have to then deorbit or demand part of the space station, not deorbit, but deorbit the crew and demand some of it, if not all of it, for a while they went off and resupplied. So that's where we went with that 335 mission planning. So once you had an MPLM identified in the cargo bay, what you put in it, whether it's food and clean socks or more food and clean socks, it doesn't really matter, and you buy some more time. So I'm trying to answer the question without telling you that it makes it sound like we actually were planning to fly 135. The planning was done as part of the rescue mission for 335. It just would be kind of carried right over if you turn that into a real mission.
Thank you. Now, let me follow up on what you said at the beginning about Middeck Science. I think you said you put some things on at the last moment. I wonder if you could describe a little bit what those science experiments were, how much was the mass and the volume, please?
Yeah, sure. You know, I had started to get ready for that, but we normally have a press briefing with the science team. That ended up scheduled out. So what they're going to do is the PAO folks are going to be able to talk to you over in the new press room about the exact science. Off the top of my head, we're flying a lot of our Pathfinder National Lab vaccines, which are basically a batch of experiments that you take up and there are various cultures. We had been working really hard on a Salmonella vaccine lately. I think this time we're flying up a variation of a staph bacteria, and you basically let it go. You activate it in space. You run it for so long, and then you freeze it, and you see how the cells in the different treatments work and act, and if zero gravity makes a difference. For the Salmonella vaccines, we found great breakthroughs using that technique. So I know we're going to continue that with we call them the NLPs, the National Lab Pathfinders, for vaccines. There's a lot of other science that's going up, a fair number of JAXA Japanese payloads, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, and if I tried, I'd be giving a disservice to the ones I forget. So I'll let the PAO folks give you a follow-up briefing to kind of fill you in on the list. It was about 3 pages long, so it's a healthy list of stuff we're flying. And it wasn't so much last minute. When I said last minute, it was kind of like in the last 3 months that we decided to concentrate a little more on the science, because we had the performance to be able to do that on this mission.
Chris, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, Chris Gabhart with NASASpaceflight.com again. In terms of the launch window for Atlantis, I understand, you know, the cutouts that are involved from a beta angle, from a dual docked ops, and from the Delta and maybe the SpaceX vehicle that's out there. But what is the current window and opportunities that you have, and are you saying that you would not take the slight opportunity you have in June from the science standpoint?
Yeah, so in this current window, we can go through the 22nd for beta angle. The delta on the range limits us to the 18th as our last launch attempt. And so we had every plan to respect that. It all depends on when we get there, and you know, your mileage may vary when we get to actual launches. We have a window that opens back up in June between a couple of dual docked ops operations, and that's when we'd be at a 3-man crew and for science. So we talked about it as an agency, as a station program, shuttle program, rather as a SOMD and decided that that's probably not worth taking due to the content we'd have to give up on the mission that we added specifically to be able to do this flight. And we just kind of decided that wasn't the right thing to do. And so from that reason, we probably skipped past that window. Now, we're not there yet. We don't know why we got there, so you can't really say for sure. But the plan would be that we wouldn't really talk about that window. And that puts us into, I think, June 29th would be the first time back. Would be about the time we'd come back. But again, that's a beta angle dependent number, and it all depends on what happens between now and then. So rough ballpark, we're looking at July if we wanted to stand down. My manifest guys coached me right before I came in here that and not for the press conference, but just for my own thinking on console, that don't let yourself think that, you know, a slip out of these 4 or 5 days, suddenly you're into July. Emotionally, that seems like a really big deal and a really big hit that we'd be talking about a launch date in July if we don't make this one in May. But from a manifest perspective and impact to the next flights, there is none. And so the difference between launching now and in July programmatically is not much different. And so it's really just like we had a couple weeks stand down and we came back. It would be a little more than that for the vehicle sitting out at the pad. But other than that, it's not a big deal to the programs.
Bill?
Well, shoot, not to talk about not making your window, but if you don't make your window, we were talking the other day about SpaceX, and is there any issue with the shuttle being on the pad when a rocket that's never flown before takes off right beside it? Are there any safety concerns or issues with your hardware?
Let's see, you know, we had the same thing when 1X launched and the shuttle was sitting on the pad, or was going to be, and we did all the right range safety assessments. Those are being done again for the Falcon 9. It's a little less risk to Pad A than than Pad B was with 1X because they're a little further down from us, but we are in their 3 sigma ellipse of limit lines. So we are impacted. It's a pretty small risk. We've looked at the numbers. Currently, we have no plans to do anything different, and we'd be happy with that risk. As that math gets refined, we'll keep an eye on it and make sure nothing changes. But no, we don't have any worries there.
Chris?
One more quick one about the window. You mentioned July. If you miss this window completely, into June, July would be the next one. But something just clicked in my mind that aren't all the Russian docking ports where you'd be berthing MRM-1-2 full in July?
Yeah, we'd have to shuffle a fair number of the Russian things, which is one of the other reasons why we didn't want to go in the June window. The replan to make all that work needs a little bit of time to happen. So yeah, I don't know the specific replan that would happen on the station side. It would cause a fair bit of rework, but that would be the next opportunity if we could make it work from a docking standpoint.
I think we'll go with Ken and have this be our last question.
Planetary Society for either of the mics, I guess. The question is about the KU band antenna failure that you had on the last mission. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you know, why that happened. Was something missed? And are there any changes you made in the processing or in shuttle operations for this flight? If it were to happen again, would the astronauts be able to more quickly download the video from the tiles?
So we talked that a fair bit in our flight readiness reviews. The teams down here at Kennedy were very quick to get into discovery and get the KU deployed out and be able to do some checkouts, and rapidly found that system has a couple of boxes. Some are inside the avionics bays, inside the shuttle, down on the middeck, and some are outside as part of the KU antenna assembly. We call those the deployed assembly that is outside. While we were in orbit with STS-131, we were pretty sure this failure was in a component called the exciter, which basically adds the signal into the KU system. And it was either not receiving a signal from the boxes inside the shuttle, or it itself outside had failed. We were pretty sure it was the outside thing because we've never seen any of the boxes inside fail before. And on STS-92, we had a KU failure that was due to an exciter failure in the deployed assembly. So we kind of had a failure at least that said that maybe that's what we got going on again here. Long story to say that the Kennedy guys got in there very quickly and were able to test right away that the outputs of those boxes inside were fine, and that the failure was in fact in that exciter in the deployed assembly. So it was a transistor, and they sent me an 8 meg file complete with detailed scanning electron microscope images where they cut the transistor into many pieces and found that 2 of the legs had come off. One of the solder joints broke, and when it popped off, it probably cracked one of the other ones, and was probably just an original manufacturer that just had at the minimum margin on that component, and over time it just broke. So it doesn't look like anything other than a single point kind of a light bulb failure with that transistor. That said, that pretty much means we don't really have a good screen for those kind of failures, and we talked a lot, even before we knew what the failure was, what we would do different on this mission. We could fly some spare boxes for those inside boxes. They're rather bulky and hard to change out, but they could. But given the fact that we've never seen failures in those boxes before and now have yet a second confirmation that it was an outside box, we didn't decide that there was enough of a buy down in risk to bother flying spare boxes. We talked about what we would do differently from a procedure standpoint, mostly with regards to the inspection data, and decided that the team really did come up with the plan. In fact, that was always the plan all along, was if we had a KU failure, we would downlink via station assets. We never end-to-end tested it, but that was the plan, and the decision was made for the risk that KU would fail, which was pretty small, and the work needed to be done, which was pretty big. That was one of those deferred things. We put the skeleton plan in place and called that good enough until we needed it. And so they pulled it off the shelf on 131 and got it running right away and got us all the data we needed. We had about a 24-hour delay on that initial inspection data. And so that's all been polished, and we asked the teams fresh off of doing that, hey, did you learn any lessons? Is there anything better? And they came up with a couple ideas. There's some different software that if they had their choice, they'd like to fly. If you remember, the process was the crew records the imagery on a high-def tape, and then we had to have them play that and convert it to an AVI movie file, transfer that file over to the station and download it. A lot of the 3D imagery is embedded in the 3D signals embedded in that imagery, and downlinking via the station assets, it would get lost and compressed. So we had to get it into an AVI file. So the new software, we're not going to fly it this time, but we'll have it for next time, would basically make that AVI file automatically as it's recording the other imagery. So that's a pretty good get ahead, would save the crew time if we ever got there. It would save about 5 or 6 hours of the crew having to manually convert those files. Other than that, we didn't really find any efficiencies that were really worth pursuing. There were some pretty big drastic ones to completely re-architecture the way the station downlinks imagery. That really wasn't worth doing. Or you could do the same thing, rewire the shuttle to match the station's architecture, and again, that wasn't worth doing. So we basically just polished our procedures, and we'll do it again if we have to. Failure rates on the KU were something in the, I can't even remember them, so I better not quote them. But it was pretty low probability that we're going to have this problem again. But if it does show up again, we're good. I think the last part of your question, Ken, and I'm burying you in data, was did we screen anything differently? And we ran all the standard pre-flight tests. Like I said, it was kind of a light bulb failure, so there really wasn't anything else to check extra on Atlantis before it flew. You can tell I had a several-day meeting about the KU band antenna.
Well, that will conclude the STS-132 pre-launch news conference. Please join us here on NASA television tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern for the L-1 countdown status briefing. For more information on the STS-132 mission and crew, visit www.nasa.gov/shuttle. Thank you.